Assalamualaikum warahmatullah. Alright, so we'll be continuing on with our review series. We'll be talking about the stage 5 in the book, which is titled the era, of the four madhahib. So this is sort of the stage after the lives of the great imams, when there emerged like the four great madhahib that we still know today. And unfortunately, this also became a stage when there's more rivalry between the four madhahib, which wasn't present during their lives. As we know, they often would learn from each other, and there was a lot of friendly support between them, but then unfortunately it became more rivalrous afterwards. So there's also a lot of political disorder during this time, a lot of preoccupation with external invasions. Towards the end of this era, there was the Mongols sacked Baghdad and really destroyed the land there. Unfortunately, they destroyed the library as well, and the books were dumped into the river, and so a lot of knowledge was lost that way. So knowledge declined dramatically. There's also the discovery of paper, which came from China and then went all the way to Andalus. And then there's the emergence of factionalism, so when people started to ascribe to certain institutes and dissociate from others. So our chapter lists a long number of prominent fuqaha of this stage under the different madhahib. I decided not to list them here or name them one by one, just because it's a long list, and I thought that you could all review that on your own, but it's probably good to review it on your own, but also just remember that Sheikh Yasser Bijaz told us we wouldn't be responsible for too many individual names during the exam. So factors that affected fiqh during this time. So like I mentioned, there's a reduction in the number of madhahib, so it went from the 13 great imams that we talked about earlier to now 4. The madhahib also reached their final form of systemization at this time, and people started promoting individual madhahib over others. There was encyclopedias of fiqh that were compiled at this time. There's also more a widespread use of hypothetical fiqh, so people started making hypothetical questions to help their students understand fiqh issues, which could be helpful in some situations. Unfortunately, at some point it also went out of control because people started asking irrelevant questions towards the end of the era. There's also the end of ijtihad in this era and the beginning of taqlid, which is again that uncritical following of scholars. So this led to a long period of stagnation afterwards. Even though the intention was to preserve the deen, the culture sort of changed and led to a stagnation. And then the fiqh writing became a standardized format for this, so that whenever people wanted to study a book of fiqh, it was sort of always found to be in the same format and the same organization. So like we know today, most books of fiqh start with the hara and then go from there. Comparative fiqh began to be a bigger science this time. The great libraries of Baghdad were lost as well, like I mentioned earlier. So the role of the scholars during this time are a few. So first of all, they were sort of responsible for studying individual madhahib and to perfect their systems. And then tarjih is the concept of favoring one opinion over another in the same madhab. So they were able to sort of pick quote unquote the official opinion of the school. And then the advocacy of madhhabism. So the scholars started to advocate for people to study fiqh under or through the lens of a madhab rather than studying it individually. And lastly, we talked about the ethics of disagreement in this chapter. So we did talk about how previously how there are different types of disagreement, and some are acceptable and not acceptable, but no matter even if they are acceptable, we need to keep in mind different rules. First of all, we should realize that there is pluralism in fiqh, and that's okay, and it's okay to disagree, but we should never be argumentative or rude about it. So these are some etiquettes to observe when discussing the issues. So the golden rules that we talked about are first that we have to realize that there are 3 infallibles, which are the Quran, Sunnah, and the Ijma of the Sahaba. So you can't argue with those. And then there's no ikhtilaf or no disagreement on matters that are well established in the Sharia. So like we talked about before, you can't argue about whether or not you need to fast or pray, or certain things are just so well established you can't argue or disagree on them. And then if there is ikhtilaf or disagreement, then look at it as a mercy from Allah. The obligation of the believer is to seek the truth, and so it comes in many different formats, and sometimes a layman doesn't know how to differentiate. So in that case, it's important for you to follow an authority that you trust, and you can't ban the discussion of another opinion. It's not really ethical or acceptable. The golden ethics of disagreement, so sort of along the same line. So when you are, discussing different issue or different opinions on an issue, first of all, you should identify your terminology, because many people from different cultures or languages can use different words to mean different things, or use the same words to mean different things. So we talked about how madhahib itself is like a word that's often has different connotations to different people. So make sure that you define your terminology and that you all understand what you're talking about. Okay, and then also name your sources. Don't judge intentions, but only statements. So keep a margin of error and realize that your argument could be wrong. Give people chances to reply to your statements. Don't sort of close that gate. Always bring the discussion back on track. Don't get distracted. Be united on the principles of unity, even if you have disagreements. And realize that if you're arguing with the ignorant, they can defeat you, because, they can say anything they want, and it's sort of a useless discussion. Like, for example, we talked about how Abu Hanifa was once asked, what if the sun rises before its time? Like, when do you make suhoor? That's such an irrelevant question coming from an ignorant person. Like, you can't argue with that. It's not about winning the battle, it's about winning minds and hearts. So keep your intentions clear. Golden tips of what to do after disagreements. So try to always find excuses for your opponents. Maintain the spirits of brotherhood or sisterhood. Don't name call or label people. Know that enforcing your opinion on other people is not possible. That's their choice. And remember to always respect our notable imams from the past and present. Okay, so that is the conclusion. Inshallah, next time we'll be talking about stage 6, the era of taqlid. So